Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frank Spivak, and welcome to this edition of the Strategy, Marketing, and Brand Power Hour. Today, we're going to be talking about decision-making and being faster and better at the decision-making process. So let's get started and get into the session. And I will share the screen. So again, welcome to this session of decision-making better and faster. My name is Frank Spivak, and for more than 30 years, I've helped organizations enhance their image, engage their customers, and enrich their businesses. I've been a chief marketing officer, member of management team, president, CEO, writer, author, a speaker, trainer, coach, consultant. Importantly, I am a lifelong learner, something that I would encourage everyone to be. And I'm also a motorcycle rider and trainer. So there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is that the pandemic isn't over. And when it's over, something else will take its place, meaning that there is, in general, when you look at history and you look at the economy over the last several decades, there is a minor crisis every 3 to 5 years. And then there is a major crisis every 8 to 12 years. So when you look back, you can look at Y2K, you can look at bird flu, you can look at all the various types of viruses that we've had. We have had the computer bubble, the internet bubble, the housing bubble, the financial bubble. Something out there happens all the time. And we tend to remember the time after the crisis as things get better and not what led up to the crisis or what it was like during that crisis. The good news is most everyone survives. And it is an excellent learning opportunity. It gives you an ability to study what's happening in the world and in your business and in your industry and figure out what it is that you can do to be better. It also gives you an opportunity to readjust your business. So it might be an opportunity for you to go in another direction. It might be an opportunity for you to double down on a particular product or service that you're working on. But it gives you the ability to make changes. Some of those changes are getting rid of bad employees and bad business. If you have customers that don't really fit who you are and where you're going, then you might as well drop them. But it is also an opportunity to look at your staffing requirements, what's happening at your company and the environment, how people are contributing and things like that. And then as another piece of good news, usually there is a period of growth that follows a crisis. And a crisis in one market may not necessarily affect you in your market, but it might the next one, the next crisis that takes place. Here is the main lesson. Those companies that can adapt, make good decisions with greater confidence, speed, and follow-up will survive. Those that don't, they die. It's pretty simple. So what happens? You need to get comfortable with what's called VUCA. VUCA is an acronym of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Each of these is an element to the changing world, the things that are happening around you, your business, your industry, and the markets. Volatility is pretty simple, especially just looking at the stock market today in the last couple of days, where it's been wildly up and then wildly down. That's volatility. Not sure where it's going. The uncertainty is, again, not sure where that's going. Is tomorrow going to be up? Tomorrow going to be down? What's it going to be like next week, next month? And then there is complexity. Complexity being that there are so many systems and processes out there that you have to understand all these different complex elements and how they all fit together. The complex systems of the world, of your buying market, of the customers. So, for example, if you're a building contractor, understanding the complexity of the systems attached to mortgage rates, housing starts, cost of materials, all of those fit into certain patterns that become complex systems. And then ambiguity. Ambiguity meaning you're really not sure what it means. Ambiguity in seeing a signal and still trying to figure out what that is intended to show you as a direction or as a way forward. So each of these elements, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, can change up or down. And sometimes they're connected with one another, and other times they're just independent of others. So you can have a period of low volatility, but you still have high uncertainty and still high complexity and ambiguity. You can get comfortable with VUCA by gathering information, not just data, but information. You also want to be able to share with your team your level of comfort with uncertainty and complexity and volatility. At the same time, you want to find out what your team's level of comfort is with this, because you need to be able to work together as a team and taking your strengths and their strengths and building something better. You want to be able to look at weaknesses or other opportunities to strengthen yourselves and shore up any of the weaknesses. And certainly to be comfortable with VUCA, you need to read, you need to learn, you need to talk with others and try some experimentation. There is another way to get comfortable with VUCA, and that is to create frameworks and processes for decision-making and action. Now, what do I mean by frameworks and processes, and how does that help in the decision-making process? By creating frameworks and processes for all of your decisions, you are better prepared for all those decisions. When you have a framework that you are comfortable with, you know the various steps, all you need to do is to start plugging things in order to make sense of what's going on. When you have these frameworks and processes, you learn how to frame the problem correctly. Many times it's very difficult to understand what that problem is, and you have to talk through it to find out what really is at the heart of the problem. Kind of goes back to grade school days when there were word problems in math. The idea is understanding what's going on and to frame it to come up with what is the problem and what is it that I need to solve. When you have frameworks and processes, you learn how to understand the context of the problem. What are the elements that surround the problem and can provide contributions for and against that problem? You also learn which problems that you are actually trying to solve and only working on that particular problem. Because there is so much volatility and uncertainty, sometimes we get caught up in the fact that we're working on one problem, another problem crops up, and then we lose sight of what we were originally working on, and we want to go off into that new problem. And let's just try and solve one problem at a time. That helps you with getting comfortable with all of the things that are happening around you. And again, when you have frameworks and processes, you learn deadlines and decision rights and constraints. All of these are, some people might look at them as limiting factors, but studies actually show that when you have deadlines, decision rights, and constraints, you are now free to concentrate on those things that you actually have the ability to change. When you have constraints or bounding rules, there's no sense looking outside of those, since you can't change those, and it makes more sense then concentrate on the things that you can change. So let's look at some of these a little bit more in detail. So what exactly needs to be decided? This can be the most important aspect of decision making. So write out the issue. Figure out what is the problem. And when you write it out, whether you put it on your computer or you put it on a yellow pad or whatever, the idea is that you are making that more concrete, understanding what needs to be decided. Then when you've done that, you should reframe what you wrote. Reframing it, meaning that, is there another perspective that you can bring into that particular problem? Reframing it so that maybe you're looking at it not necessarily from the east and west, but the north and south. And then understanding, is this a singular problem or part of a system? Meaning that when you have this particular decision to make, you are done with that particular decision. Or is this part of a system where your solution then feeds into another issue, another problem, something else that needs to be decided? Understanding what that bounding rule is important. Also, you want to figure out, are you trying to find a problem to fit a solution that you already have? There is this parable that's come to life, in that trying to understand what is the level of the problem that you're trying to solve. So is the problem the drill or the hole that you want to create, and the drill is the mechanism to do that? Or is the end result or the decision the shelf that requires a hole in the wall to hold an anchor, which requires the drill to be used to get you in that direction? So understanding the level of the problem that you're trying to solve is key to helping you understand the problem and find a solution. So what constraints exist for the problem? Is there a time constraint? I need to get this done and decided by next month or next quarter or next year. Is there a constraint on money? Your committee or your group only has the ability to spend $10,000 on fixing this problem. Is there a location? Is it isolated to your operation at your office, at your home office, or is it for satellite locations? Is the constraint the people that are involved? Is this going to be affecting hundreds of people, or is this just going to be affecting maybe 10 or 20 people? And then what is the constraint for the customers? Do they already have something that you are trying to come up with a solution, but you can't go too far because then you'll lose that customer? Or you're trying to address customers that you have never, ever dealt with. So understanding each of those various constraints is important. Here's a big one that I've really worked on a lot over the years. And that's understanding the decision rights. Who is the ultimate decision maker? Is it a committee that makes that decision? And who really needs to be involved in the decision? Is the decision maker part of the committee? If the decision maker is not part at the beginning, then they have abdicated their decision-making status. And I'll give you a little story. And then, is consensus good enough, or does it need to be 100%? Many years ago, when I was communication manager for a company, we were introducing a new product. And with that new product, we certainly had, this is way before the digital days, and we had to have flyers, product flyers, data sheets, advertising, and the like. And as we were developing the product flyer, we got near the end, and then we handed it over to the president of the company. He was not happy. He didn't like the direction. He didn't like the tone. He didn't like the photographs. He didn't like the way it was written. And he had big red marks all over the place. So we had to spend weeks and a lot of money correcting everything that we had done. Now, had we involved the president sooner, we would have eliminated all of that. So the next time we came up with this situation, I went to the president and said, do you want to be involved in this process? And if you do, you need to be there with us while we are making the decisions. I don't want to go down the road and then all of a sudden we have to do a U-turn again and spend more money to get the product right. So the president did come into the meetings. He was there at the very beginning, but then he realized he didn't have the time to do that, and that there were plenty of people in the room who were being concerned about not only the product from a company standpoint, but also from the customer standpoint. And so he then realized that he could be comfortable with removing his decision rights as part of that committee and leaving it to the rest of the committee to make it happen. Next in the process is data and information. What data do you have, and what data do you need? And what data do you really, really need? And how much data is good enough to make the decision? And this is something that you need to decide ahead of time. Jeff Bezos, a couple of years ago, came out with one of his letters talking about Amazon and how they did things. His comment was that if they can get 70% of the data and information needed to make a decision, then it was good enough. And the reason is that if you want to decide, if you need to have all of the information, and I'm talking about absolutely everything, if you're trying to do that, you're wasting time chasing down that data. You're also wasting money chasing down that data. And you're wasting opportunity by chasing down that data. So for example, I was in a product committee meeting, and we had a great deal of information in order to move forward. One of the individuals in the group decided, oh no, we need more. We need to find this, without understanding the fact that in order to get all of that information, we would have to suspend operations on moving forward on the product. And we would have to figure out how we're going to get this information and lose an opportunity against our competitor. By having this product out, it would give us an opportunity to get to market faster. Instead, we wasted time, we wasted money, and we wasted an opportunity. And it turns out that the competitor came out with a product before we did, and they took the #1 spot. And then also in your frameworks and processes, what perspectives are you considering in the solution? have you looked at it from a customer's perspective? And certainly we're always looking at it from our own company's perspective, but other stakeholders as well. So sometimes when you're coming up with a new product, some of the other stakeholders could be your suppliers. It could be certainly within your company, but it could be those that are actually making the product or those that have to repair the product. So have you considered all the different perspectives when you're coming into trying to develop a solution? And then as you're coming into the solution and you're starting to streamline it, you're starting to figure out that you might have a way forward, it's really a good idea to triangulate your issues and your solutions. So meaning, when we're talking about GPS and locations, the idea is that you're triangulating off of a number of different satellite stations to really pinpoint where you're at. So triangulating on your issues and solutions, consider at least 3 diverse backgrounds and talk to them about what's going on. Now, it could be someone that you can trust and you can speak candidly with them. It could be someone who always disagrees with you. That could be sometimes a very painful situation, but certainly you'll get a perspective of how that person disagrees with you, why they disagree, what's the issues, what are the holes. You also might want to talk to someone who has absolutely no experience with your issue. This is beneficial because then you're allowing yourself to tell the story. And when you tell the story, sometimes you're learning about that issue again, maybe from a slightly different standpoint. Also look at someone from a different part of your organization. So they're tangentially familiar with what's going on, but they don't really have the nuts and bolts understanding of what you're doing. And so that still helps with the input on triangulating your issues and your solutions. Also, now this is something that might be a little difficult for people to understand, but you want to make it easy for people to question your solution. Is there a way to say, what are 3 ways that this solution might fail? Who will disagree with the solution and why? And what is the biggest obstacle to making it work? When you think of these 3 things, 3 ways to make it fail, who's going to disagree and why, and what are the biggest obstacles, you are setting yourself in a path for success, because now you can create contingency plans for when things go wrong. And then you also want to figure out, what is my blind spot? I've come up with a solution, I've come up with this idea, but what am I missing? What am I not seeing? What's behind and back that is lurking over there that I haven't considered? So again, what is it that I'm missing that makes this what I think is a perfect solution? What is missing that could actually turn it into a disaster? Now, in the decision-making process, there are a number of traps. And I'm going to give you just a few of these ideas to help you understand how to avoid the traps that exist in decision-making. The first is absolutely, ultimate decision maker needs to be in at the beginning. You need to understand what the decision maker has in mind. What are his or her goals in making sure that this is a good solution? There's a lot of good solutions, but if they don't fit the goals and objectives of the company, then it's not really that great of a solution. You also want to be aware of leaders and experts. And the reason being is that they can become too focused on their expertise or a desired outcome to consider alternatives. When an expert starts to interject on, all of the issues related to the problem or the solution, it understand that it's only from one perspective, and it could be a perspective that is less important to the customer or the overall process. So be careful that when the experts are talking, that they are really concentrating on what's at stake and not necessarily their own particular expertise. And the same goes true for the leaders. Sometimes I've seen where the leader of the organization is the last to speak. Everyone else gets everything out on the table, and then the leader has his opportunity to say something. If the leader speaks too soon, it can bias the entire group into a groupthink kind of thing to please the leader. Another trap: don't let people go along just to get along. It could be a case where people have said, I give up, I'm just going to go along with the group, and you wind up ignoring or putting that person's ideas and concerns and comments, and you're just shoving them off into a drawer and not letting that be part of the solution. So don't let people just go along to say, okay, I give up, let's just get it done. Because I've seen problems, I've seen issues where and kind of related to the experts issue, where the expert just beats and beats and beats and beats on a certain particular aspect, and everyone says, okay, forget it, I give up, let's do it their way. And I can tell you, most of the time it's disastrous. Another case is, don't let people decide prematurely. Make sure that they have all of the data that you have in your possession and give that to them. Don't let them just say, oh yeah, sure, let's just pick, you've explained solution A of 3 solutions, and they say, oh yeah, let's pick that one. You have to take time to consider all of the alternatives and figure out what's going on. So don't let them decide too prematurely. Take their information, but ask them to kindly wait for the next few things, and then start to decide what's going on. This one, I've seen too many products just become problems. And this is the idea of the grand standard. You could be 3/4 of the way down a product development program, and then someone out of the blue, grandstander meaning someone there in the bleachers, they've never really been involved and invested in the problem and the issue. Someone from the outside all of a sudden says, hey, it'd be really great if it could do XYZ. And your first inclination might be, oh, hey, those might be good features. Those might be good additions. The problem is that person was never involved in the first place, because there are going to be processes that led you to where you are. And that when you consider all these other new or different features, that it will now sidetrack everything you've done. You could be in a position where, if you decide to go with these new features, everything you've done so far is wasted and you're just going to toss it. So beware of grandstanders and the effect it's going to have on your program and your decision. If someone's going to really provide input and you think it's necessary, get them there in the beginning. The next one is, and we're coming into the end here, is downstream issues. We tend to think of, we have a problem, we've developed a solution, And we don't necessarily think about what is the first order consequences of making that decision. Sometimes these are unintended consequences. Some are the unintended consequences is the fact that you haven't even considered what's going to take place when you develop this product or this program or service. When the decision is made, think about what the possible consequences are that can take place once you are fully invested in that situation. So if you introduce new product A and you bring that to market, first order consequence would be what happens to your other products. Another first order consequence would be what happens with your competitor. Are they going to do something? Second order consequences are a little bit more difficult to think about, but it would be you've developed product A, your competitor then develops another problem. This is your second order consequence. And then now you're competing against with that. You're competing against that particular product, one that you hadn't considered before. And then third order consequences are just going even further down the road. Now, this sounds complicated, and it can be, but it's a worthwhile exercise to understand what might happen as you go down with your decision making process. When you do that, you are at least considering what happens. And by considering that, maybe there are things that you would bring back into the decision making process that you would change in order to create a more favorable first order or second order consequence. So think about those downstream issues as you go forward. And you also have to take into consideration what will your customers think and do? What will your competitors think and do? What will your employees think and do? And what will your suppliers think and do? These are all part of that process and understanding perspectives, because that is vital to helping you not only with how you have framed your problem to begin with, but then how that solution will play out with your customers. Because I've seen sometimes where one company has developed a new product and it becomes the most expensive product in that category. So your customers might think, are these guys crazy? What are they doing? Why are they coming up with this? Your competitors might think, hey, finally somebody's coming up with a product that is going up in price as opposed to coming down in price. What will your employees think and do? How do they think about this new product? Do they think it adds to the overall viability of your company and your luster and your reputation and brand? And what will your suppliers think? All of a sudden you come up with a new product and you have a supplier that's been getting you product that you've wanted all this time, but now they find out that you're making this new product that doesn't include their product. How do you think that that's going to affect the things that took place for them being a reliable supplier for you? So decision-making process is, yes, you have made that decision, but now you need to understand what are the consequences, what happens after you've made that decision. Now, sometimes it will help and give you a better understanding, but you at least need to consider these. So I've been going through this for a little bit. Let's kind of summarize and get this thing going. Companies that can adapt quickly by making better and faster decisions will not only survive, but they will thrive. And those that don't, they die. It's just as simple as that. For better decision making, you need to be comfortable with VUCA, which is the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And to help you with being comfortable with VUCA, as well as the overall decision-making process, You need to develop frameworks and processes to make your decision making more efficient and more effective. As you come up and develop your solutions, you need to triangulate with other opinions. Find people that dissent and have them poke holes in your ideas and see what happens. You want to make it easy for people to question your idea. I didn't mention this earlier, but if you have said, this is my decision, it's over, end of story, don't even bother talking to me, then you've already closed off potential solutions or ways of dealing with the other sets of consequences that take place. Decision making is filled with traps. So I gave you a few of those ideas to avoid those decision making traps. And I can tell you, they happen at every single meeting and consequence. These traps exist, and if you sit back in your next set of meetings and just kind of listen to what's going on, you'll hear these traps, these things that take place that can be really detrimental to full and better decision making. And lastly, consider first, second, and third order consequences. When you look downstream, when you take a longer perspective, you can then have a better feel for how your decision making will be effective for your company, for yourself, and for your customers. And remember that seeking advice does not mean you have to take it. But if you are not willing to take advice, not be willing to listen to other people's ideas, then you have some issues. So taking advice helps give you more confidence in making the decision you feel is right for you and your company. So that is the biggest takeaway that I hope you will get from this discussion on decision making. Decision making it has a lot of science to it, but it all comes down to me, in my view, to coming down with a human-based understanding that nothing is ever perfect, and that you can get advice to help you make a good, proper, better, faster decision. So that is the end of my presentation on this. And if we have any questions, otherwise, thanks for attending. And I appreciate the opportunity to share this whole topic of decision making with you.
Hey, Frank, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Eric.
Hey, I caught, I would say probably maybe the last half of this, but no, I can totally relate to being able to make quick decisions. I know smaller companies that are more adaptable to moving or making decisions because they don't have any committees to report to. But what impacts do you typically, or what with small businesses having to make decisions, what obstacles do you usually see in smaller businesses, say like one like our size?
Well, some of the things that I see is that small companies tend to think that we're too small to have a process, to have a framework to help out. And so they wind up that every single decision is brand new, unique, and it's never been dealt with before, when in reality, there is a step, there is a way to move through that decision-making process. And so the subject matter might be different.
Mhm.
but how you arrive at the solution, um, when you consider these kinds of frameworks that I put together here, when you consider that framework and being able to not only frame but reframe the problem,
Mhm.
even in just that step, writing it down, putting it on a piece of paper, putting it on a computer, putting it on something. Um, just the idea of framing the problem um, will get you a long way in that decision-making process. And so sometimes we don't even think about that. And that's why um, I think small companies think that everything's unique. Um, and there are ways to help make it better, to give you something so that it's not so that you don't think that it's a unique problem. Certainly it's a different subject matter. As I mentioned before, it's a different subject matter, but the process is going to be the same. What data do you have? What do I need to do? What are the constraints? Um, do I have to have this decision tomorrow, or do I have to have the decision next week, next month, next quarter? Um, when you start building in those constraints and boundaries on your decision, it actually frees up your decision-making process. When you think it's everything, and we have to consider everything from everybody for all time. No, you don't have to. There are ways of trimming that down and trimming it back so that you can concentrate on what actually needs to be decided. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yep. All right. Well, cool. That was kind of my big question that I had. So I appreciate that. And then the next power hour is is every other week.
Yep.
I got that on my calendar.
Yeah. So we'll do that. And this session I'll share starting tomorrow, and then start talking about what the next topic is so that we can get ready for that.
Perfect.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Frank.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
You bet.
All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye.